if you don't have those written agreements for compensation and there's no guarantee that the seller is going to be paying your compensation, then you may be very well working for free. One of the critical advantages of this agreement is that NAR would be able to pay the settlement amount over time. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Real Estate Show. By the time you're hearing this, it will be Monday, but we are in here on the weekend because there was some breaking news on Friday, and that is that the many years long Sitzer et al. Litigation has reached a proposed settlement.
Better known as what? NAR.
National Association of Realtors. They were the defendants among some other people in
Gotcha.
that.
I didn't know who the Sitzer was. I knew there was an NAR.
That's the named plaintiff in the class action.
Gotcha.
So I am sure if you are a real estate agent, you are at least somewhat aware of this going on. But if you're not a real estate agent and you find this interesting, or even if you are an agent and you only vaguely know what's going on, let me just give a background here. So this was a case that was filed in Missouri federal court in 2019. The class was certified in 2022. So basically when you get a class action, it means, or when the class is certified, it doesn't necessarily mean that the plaintiffs are right, but it means that if it turns out that they're right, too many of them have the same harm. It would not be a good use of resources to litigate every single case individually. So certified as a class, meaning, okay, once we're done with this litigation, it applies to all the people that fit in that class. So as of 2022, that would have been any person who had sold a home in the preceding 4 years using one of the 4 multiple listing services that were named in that lawsuit. And, of course, NAR was named as a defendant in that as well. Now, in the last couple months, this case went to trial. And the jury returned a verdict of almost $1.8 billion, with a B, $billion. And this settlement would end the ongoing litigation. So you might hear a verdict. Well, what ongoing litigation? We're done. That's probably what you were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But a verdict doesn't end the litigation unless the defendants give up. So there's appeal, requesting a new trial. There's all kinds of things that they could have done and were intending to do. Some of the defendants had already filed those documents to do so. So this settlement will end that ongoing litigation for NAR, not just for this case, but 3 other similar cases. I'm pretty sure it's 3 others, so 4 total. And the other similar cases are basically like same deal, but different states or, slightly different scope. You might be wondering, well, what were these people suing over? It's about the cooperative compensation. So in the MLS, presently, you can list what compensation is being offered to the buyer's agent. And these sellers that became the plaintiffs were saying that was unfair because why should I have to pay the buyer's agent if we, say I don't want to? If we're not offering any compensation, they were suggesting that buyer's agents wouldn't show their properties because they wouldn't be getting paid by the seller. Now, whether these things are true or not, at this point, it doesn't matter.
It is a question that sellers or people that have been buying or selling houses have asked. It's just the answer's always been like, oh, well, that's how it's done.
Yes, yeah. And, and the reason I say at this point it doesn't matter is because this proposed settlement, if it's approved by the court, is going to take away that offer of compensation in the MLS entirely. So, yeah, there's some big changes coming up. And, one of the biggest counter arguments by, those representing the interests of the real estate agents and those big groups that work together is that compensation has always been negotiable. And that's true, but what the plaintiffs were arguing is that we didn't know that. These agents are supposed to be in a fiduciary role to us, and if that was true, why didn't we know? Why was it presented to us as if there wasn't a choice? It was 6%. We're splitting it this way, and that's just what we do. So again, whether I agree with that or not, at this point, none of that's all kind of moot because the proposed settlement has been reached. Now, I wasn't able to get my hands on the full settlement. It was just kind of put together Friday morning, signed Friday morning. I think maybe the New York Times might be one of the only sources
Yeah,
that
you
has
haven't
the
been
whole
able
thing.
to make it. They haven't made it public yet, right?
So it'll be filed with the court. Once it is, then I'm going to tear that thing up.
Of course.
And then there will be a process that may take several months to get a judge's approval. But once the judge has approved the settlement, which is very, very likely, then all of this becomes real. It's final.
So it's not effective immediately. It's effective once the judge approves the settlement.
Yep. So right now, I believe the terms of the settlement, as they've been shared through news outlets, would include the no offer of compensation on MLS.
Some correctly, some incorrectly. This is why we're making this, to try and make correct statements.
But that would begin this July. So NAR said mid-July. Don't know exactly what that means, so we'll just say July. And the other rule change will be that if you aren't already, I mean, I know a number of agents are doing this, but I also know there's plenty that aren't because they tell me, written agreements with your buyer clients. Because if you don't have those written agreements for compensation and there's no guarantee that the seller is going to be paying your compensation, then you may be very well working for free. So it'll be a rule nationwide now that you...
So, we like to incorporate something in our business where, you give three choices when you're proposed a problem. And it's like choice 1, 2, and 3. So from these agents' perspective, what are the now new choices, I guess? And like what are 3 options that they can do? So, or 3 things that could happen, I guess, is a better question.
One would be you can still offer compensation to the buyer, but not on MLS. So that's, just part of the negotiation. Again, you don't know. The seller doesn't have to say yes. It's not a slam dunk, but it can still be negotiated for that the seller will pay the buyer's agent. The other thing is the ability to list concessions to the buyer is not being taken away. So if you're saying that you're going to pay part of the buyer's closing costs and part of the buyer's closing costs includes commissions, then the part that could go towards the commissions as well. And then really on the buyer's agent side, probably looking at some alternative models to make sure that you get paid. And that could be, this is all speculative at this point. It's so new. We're going to see a lot of innovators rise and give good ideas, and it'll get better over time. But I could see a world where a buyer's agent gets into a limited scope agreement, says, I will show you up to 10 properties over the course of 1 month or whatever. This is all just speculative, for a compensation of X dollars if you close one of those. If we extend beyond that, then my compensation goes up. If I show you more than 10 properties or I'm dealing with you for longer than X amount of time. Could also see instead of just... It could
almost be like the due diligence period in some capacity, like, hey, it's applied towards your buyer's agent's fees if you kind of, like, hey, I'm going to give you $1,500 for showing these properties if we so happen to go.
Oh, no, I don't mean...
You don't think that?
No, I mean that the buyer's going to pay it.
Just flat out pay it.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So you buyer will pay me X amount of dollars if you buy one of these 10 houses I show you in this scope. If we go beyond that and you buy after I've already shown you 20 in 2 months, then the compensation is going to go up. And I also could see an arrangement where a buyer's agent says, I'll do all these things and get you under contract, and that's where I end. I'll get you under contract. I'll help you negotiate. I will do these specific services. And then once you're under contract, then you're getting your own inspectors. You're handling all of the scheduling. You're doing all of these things. Now, being an agent is a fiduciary role. So these associations locally are going to have to really weigh in on this, because I could see if especially buyer's agents who are running around town sometimes for years with the buyer to try to help them find the perfect property, the amount of time that they may put in is they're just not going to. Yeah, it's not going to be worth.
The people we had breakfast with this morning, they were looking for a lakefront property as a second house. They live in Charlotte and they wanted a lake house, and they bought their lake house in 2020, and they were looking for 3 years before that and had looked at over 100 houses. So, 3 years and 100 houses as a buyer's agent before you got paid, that's a long time.
Yeah. So these alternative fee structures, I think, will become a necessity. How they look, we don't know yet. But I think people are going to have to get really creative. And I think the Association of Realtors, like the North Carolina Association of Realtors, is going to have to give some really clear guidance about your fiduciary obligation. Like, are you allowed to say, I will take you up to getting under contract and then the rest of it is on you? Because there's a lot that agents don't do, that they're not sending a note to the buyer every time they have to talk to somebody about your transaction. They might field 6 different calls in the span of a half hour about an issue, but they're not telling you every little thing they do. So it probably is easy for a lot of people to say, oh, they're overpaid anyway. Maybe some are, but there's some that are
depends
definitely
on the
not.
complexity and the time period. Like sometimes it's like, hey, I made out really good on this. Sometimes
It's just like
like
any profession.
Right.
Some people are going to be wildly overpaid, and some are not going to be paid nearly enough for what they do. And I think that in this settlement, the winners are the sellers to an extent, because they're going to pay less in commissions. But the losers are everybody else.
So what are the repercussions? Let's start talking about like what we think the fallout would be. And, you just said the winners are the sellers. So what do you think the fallout from this for the sellers are? Like, how are they the winners?
Well, the reduced payment of commissions. For them, that may be, I'm netting more, which is their main goal. They see, I don't want it. Why should I have to pay the buyer's agent? They didn't represent me. Why should I pay them? The buyers should pay them if they want to use that service. So from that perspective, the seller wins.
And another perspective from even further, and, it could possibly drop or reduce the housing prices.
Because of sellers who are paying less in commissions being willing to sell at a lower price.
Yep.
Now, they may not be overall winners, because the reduced scope of representation sometimes may mean that they're not paying for the aggressive marketing tactics or whatever it may be, or the resources that the current structure affords. But again, it's negotiated. So if a seller or buyer goes into that wide open knowing, I am paying this for this purpose, I'm not getting more than that. Where I see an issue is if sellers say, well, why should I get less? If you're going to pay less, you're going to get less. That's just the way that this is going to work out. But if that's something that the parties are aware of and they've negotiated for it and it's eyes wide open going in, that's fine. But I could see another world where the sellers say, oh, well, I didn't want to get less service.
Yeah. I mean, we see it all the time with people wanting that. I want to pay less but get the same service. Well, so does everybody in the world.
It's probably not going to happen that way.
So the fallout from the seller's agents, what's the change, or what can you see how that's going to affect them?
Well, I think this will bring sellers more aware of, or more likely to aggressively negotiate compensation. So
seller's agents, you mean?
Well, you're asking what the implications are for sellers agents?
Yes.
Reduced commissions, because the sellers are going to more aggressively negotiate compensation. I also think it may make it harder to get homes sold, because a buyer who now, up until now, it's been a great selling feature to say, buyers, why would you not use a real estate agent? They help you with so many things and you don't even have to pay them. Well, that's not the standard in this new world. It's possible that you could negotiate for that, but it is not going to be just your, wake up, get a real estate agent, you don't have to pay them. So there may be buyers that are reluctant because they've already had a hard enough time saving up for a down payment, or maybe they don't qualify if they have to spend any more money in closing costs, any of those things, that will be reluctant to get into an agreement with the buyer's agent that they have to pay.
I also think it's going to be a lot more challenging on sellers agents, because I feel like you're going to have a lot more uninformed buyers.
They're going to be blowing them up, and having to schedule the showings without an agent involved. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for everybody. And I really hope that the North Carolina Association of Realtors, they're going to have to revise the buyer agency agreement anyway, because I'm pretty sure, I don't have it in front of me, I'm pretty sure it references the offered compensation in MLS multiple times in there. So that, I mean, it's not going to be a thing. So there's going to have to be a revision of that. And I'm hoping that it will that the association will give some really good guidance to buyer's agents specifically.
Yeah.
I read an article, and sorry to cut you off, but I read an article where one of these experts, like a super smart person, like Harvard professor, was saying, well, buyers shouldn't worry about it. They can just roll it into their mortgage. And I think that shows kind of a lack of understanding of mortgage programs, because probably not. You know, how much a borrower can borrow is based on the program and the appraised value of the home. So, you know, not a lot of people can get 100% financing, which means you're borrowing 80% of the appraised value. Well, if you're borrowing 80% of the appraised value and you have your closing costs on top of that, you're bringing 20% plus your closing costs. So no, you're not rolling those costs into your mortgage. There are some programs where you can do that. So I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just not the vast majority of people.
So kind of moving forward with this NAR settlement, what do you think the repercussion is going to be for buyers?
I think that lack of education is going to be the issue here. So if buyers don't understand all that a buyer's agent does for them, then they're going to be reluctant to spend money on it for what is already a very important purchase. And it will take buyers going through significant pain of trying to find vendors, trying to figure out, is this house even worth, like, comps, all of that stuff. What do I offer? Who do I get to inspect it? How do I even find an inspector? You know, they're losing access to these vetted networks. So a buyer is going to take on the research and everything that a good buyer's agent, they've already done that. And they're kind of referring you out to their trusted professionals. So that's a big learning curve for buyers. So I think it's going to be really important to do a lot of education so that buyers understand all that a buyer's agent does for them and why it's worth spending the money if it cannot be negotiated for the seller to pay.
And then on the other side of it, you know, it could be that they don't qualify for quite as much because they are having to pay fees out of their own pocket rather than the sellers paying those fees previously.
It's possible. Yeah, that's probably more of a mortgage lender question, but yeah, I could see that being an issue.
Yeah, I mean, well, if they only have X, you know, percent of their down payment, now they have to have less because they have to pay for their commissions. Like that's big. Yeah. And then I guess the last group of people is, you know, the listing agents or the buyer's agents. I know you've spoken about it a little bit, but, you know, where do you see this going for the buyer's agents? What's the fallout and the repercussions for those people?
I think it's really the same as the buyers. We may have an issue due to the lack of education of buyers being matched up with agents. And I really hope that's not the case, because we know that what a good buyer's agent can do for the transaction. I mean, a buyer probably isn't even understanding just the administrative power that goes into getting a transaction to the closing table, not just by the buyer's agent, but like the closing attorney, the lender, et cetera.
Well, what's wild is these guys might not even know that a closing attorney is needed in North Carolina if they're buying from a different state.
Yes. Yeah.
Like cool, I want to go under contract. They
get to the closing date.
They send a contract.
The closing date.
They somehow send a contract, get it signed, and then they're like, great. They just think that they're good to go. Yeah. And that's not going to be the
bring
case.
Cash somewhere. And
yeah. So I think that's a big thing. And I think, you know, you kind of alluded to it earlier I think you're going to see some really creative means to be a buyer's agent. Mm-hmm. Like, how are you going to navigate this new way of doing things to make sure that you are still in business and make sure you're getting paid in some capacity and, you know, make sure you're still helping your clients. So I think there's a business models as far as that is concerned is going to change quite a bit. Yeah.
I could see, and kind of what I was getting at earlier, depending on what the, you know, North Carolina Association of Realtors might have to say about the fiduciary obligations, is the situation where the agent says, I'm going to get you under contract, and then you're going to have to engage somebody else if you want to do the administrative stuff, getting your inspections, scheduling all that stuff, finding your vendors. There are services that do that.
I was going to say, I think you're going to see a new business of transaction coordinator pop up,
but
pretty
independent
frequently.
Of an agent independent that a buyer is paying for.
Yes, correct.
And, I think it will kind of bifurcate perhaps the transaction a little bit of, the agents are going to be selling. They're not going to be doing your making your calls. They're not going to become your secretary anymore, which unfortunately a lot of agents do that because it's all rolled into one. So they become kind of personal assistant to their clients for a good chunk of time until the property is closed.
Yeah. So I think the last one that, and I can't remember when I predicted this or what I said about this, but I believe my prediction will hold true. And I said in 2024, I think you're going to see a massive consolidation of real estate agents, the people that were the bottom 25% that were kind of part-time. They might sell 1, 2, possibly 3 houses a year or close them, not necessarily sell them. They're going to be gone. Because if you're a buyer's agent just for families and friends, and now you don't have a guarantee of getting paid, what's the point of doing that? So I think you're going to see...
And you're not if you're doing it, like you said, for family and friends, and you don't want,
it's going to be real hard to charge...
The hardest people to get to pay you, family and friends.
Yeah. So I think you're going to see a mass exodus again of real estate agents, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. We love our real estate agents, but we love the ones that are professionals and want to make this a career. That's the ones we work with. I unfortunately
think that this will impact some good agents that we would love to see continue, but for whatever reason, economically or otherwise, it's not going to be okay for them.
That might mean that there's more opportunities for the ones that are making this a profession and a career rather than like, hey, I lost the transaction because my sister's niece is a real estate agent and they chose them even though they've never done a transaction before.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important too for brokerages to really set themselves apart as to what resources they offer for agents. I think it probably will be more important than ever who you align yourself with.
Yeah.
And just giving the guidance as things change. Now, I did want to say a little bit more just about the settlement. I mentioned the 2 big changes, but one thing this is in, and I've been saying NAR. If they call themselves NAR, I know I'm going to look really silly. I'm just going to stick with NAR. But
I mean, it is an acronym. It's NAR. They might call themselves NAR, but you're being correct. It is an acronym.
Those are the 3 letters.
Yeah. Those 3 letters actually mean something, so I'm going to say you're okay, Tiff.
But even in their fact sheet, this was prepared by them, which, obviously they're going to be trying to sell themselves and make it look better for themselves. That's the point of them putting out their own fact sheet, is that even they say one of the biggest advantages, where was it? Because I don't want anyone to be like, you're making that up. Why settling now makes sense. One of the critical advantages of this agreement is that NAR would be able to pay the settlement amount over time. So they're going to be able to pay this over 4 years. So even their bullet points say that that's one of the biggest reasons for them doing this, is that they get to not have to pay it all at once. Now, there's another website, like on NAR's website, they say your dues aren't changing in 2024 because of this.
But
they're going to change. I mean,
maybe not in 2024.
No, they said they only said 2024.
Exactly.
And they said in 2024 because of this.
Yeah.
So they're like, if they do have any sort of change in 24 for whatever reason, they're going to say, but it's not because of this.
It's not because of this. That's in 2025. So just wait. That was something I was thinking about on the car ride over here. Like, $400 and whatever $1 million. It's a whole bunch of money for a settlement. Who's getting this? Where's this money going to? And who's paying it?
NAR's paying it.
So all of
which they raise that money through dues.
So
probably other reasons, but dues.
Real estate agents' dues go to NAR, and then NAR is now going to pay this out to the people in the class action, which were people that were sellers 4 years prior to...
In the Sitzer case.
Gotcha.
Were Missouri sellers in the 4 years preceding the class certification.
So that's not the North Carolina sellers. It's not like we're going to get money.
I don't know who the classes were in the other 3
Gotcha.
settlements. But, yeah, it would go to all of the members of those classes for those classes.
Did you have to sign up to be a member, or?
So here's the thing. You don't have to sign up to be a member of a class. You can opt out. So when a class is certified, you just are that. If you don't want to participate, you can opt out of the class. So that's part of the settlement too. Part of whenever you have a settlement like this for a class action, there's an opt-out period. there's an objection period. So there are going to be people that undoubtedly are going to write in to object. Maybe even people that are members of the class saying it's not enough or it's not fair or whatever. Most often the objectors are going to be agents, their groups that represent them, et cetera. But yeah, you can opt out.
I mean, even, just me thinking of rough numbers, they're not going to get that much money.
No, I mean, the attorneys, I think, are asking for 80-something million of that, or at least they were out of the 1.8 billion. Gosh, no. And so
Dang.
here I saw some agents in our market, and this is not directed at them whatsoever, but I was kind of laughing because they were sharing at one of their conferences that the real winners in this were the attorneys, and they were like, it was something about this is why you don't go to attorneys or whatever. I'm like, just those kind.
Like, all right, you agents that said that, don't ever call TIFF on a weekend ever again. And I'll appreciate that because you're not supposed to go to them. So if you have a question and your closing is on Monday and you have an issue on the weekend, don't call because, don't go to her. Don't go to the attorneys. They don't help.
But it was more so that was what their slide that was being presented said. It's not that these agents, but they were showing the slide to show how little each member of the class was going to get and how much the attorneys were getting.
Well, the attorneys would have preferred it go and do the 1.7 billion or whatever. They would have got a whole lot more on that.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the 82 million was out of the billion or if it's going to be the same out of this. I don't know. We'll know when the settlement gets published. Yeah. But there's also another thing. This doesn't resolve claims for everybody. It resolves claims for most everybody. So it's going to basically release NAR from liability, the members, and then local realtor associations, association-owned MLS, and then any brokerages with an NAR member as principal that had a residential transaction volume in 2022 of $2 billion or below. If you had $2 billion or above, this does not apply to you. But this fact sheet says that there is kind of a separate streamlined release process should you choose. So that's something you're going to have to ask NAR about. But $2 billion or below in 2022, and the principal is a member of NAR, they would also be released.
So, any final thoughts on this? Like, what do you think this is going to do? Like, we're not going to see anything.
Right now, it's causing a panic.
It's causing a panic.
There are people that are saying they're not panicked, but just the amount of chatter, it's causing a panic of what's going to happen next.
Here's a better question. What's going to happen next? That's what they're panicked about. What would you recommend them start doing to prepare so they're not as panicked and they can be better prepared?
I think we give the North Carolina Association of Realtors just a couple weeks to review the settlement document, but then knocking on their door saying, we need guidance. We need guidance. What are you coming out with to help us navigate this? Let's talk about the ethics of these things. What if we try to get creative in a way that is respectful of, especially as a buyer's agent, respectful of our time, so that we're not working for 2 cents an hour by the time this transaction is over? Are we going to get dinged for doing something? Are you going to say we're not meeting our fiduciary obligation? Like lawyers, if I was in litigation still and I had a client that say the litigation had dragged out for 8 years, but I was not really making anything, I can't just withdraw for that because of my fiduciary obligation. So I think it's going to be really important that the association gives as much guidance as they possibly can. I know it's uncharted territory, but the landscape has changed drastically many times over the last century of this profession of realtors. So this is just another one. It's not going to be the last one either. We know that nobody has all of the answers yet, but given the knowledge that we have now, the next thing I would do is be going to your local association of realtors saying, give us guidance. These are the things that we're thinking might work. We need you to help us understand what is going to keep us within our correct guidelines.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, my 2 cents on this is if you are a real estate agent or you are the owner of a real estate brokerage or have anybody that you know is a real estate agent, take this video, click that little share button and also the subscribe button, and share this with somebody in the real estate industry, because these are just facts and then what we think because of the facts. I think the people that have been putting their information out as far as what they think is going to happen, maybe might not be actual lawyers and know how to dissect legal documents. And so they're just putting out a lot of emotions, and it might not actually be the facts. So
there's definitely, I've already seen some misinformation that like that's not, based on what's been released about the settlement, it's not consistent.
And as soon as the settlement's been made public, we'll do another one of these and take a deep dive, because old nerd Tiff over here is going to read every single page of it, and that's going to be her nightly reading, and she's going to love it because that's what she likes to do, just to make sure that our agents are fully aware of every single thing that's in that. So, subscribe to the channel, share this with a real estate agent so we can help you guys be as informed as humanly possible, because that's all we're trying to do here.
And as we learn more, we're going to share more.
Yeah.
Just like anytime we get a new contract update, we dissect it and tell you what really changed and what didn't. We're going to do the same thing here.
Yeah.
So just to try to help you, we're not going to be able to give you answers. I wish we could, but we'll give you the information. We'll give you every piece that we can dissect to help you make the best decision possible. So
no, that's it. Sunday Scaries.
Sunday Scaries.
NAR. We're over here at the law firm.
Yeah.
But you're getting this on Monday. We appreciate you. Have a great week. Go sell some houses, and we'll all be excited.